Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. This eyrie claimed me months ago, perched atop a repurposed commercial husk where industry once hummed. Now residential units stacked like bleached bones. Superficially, renewal reigned. Walls scrubbed clean, paint laid thick and hopeful, fixtures gleaming with manufactured newness. Yet the building's old circulatory system, the elevator shafts, remained, awkwardly sutured into the modern layout. An architectural footnote I scarcely registered, preoccupied as I was with the choreography of furniture and the city sprawling beneath my windows. My inaugural night dissolved into sleep's undertow when, near midnight's cusp, a sound surfaced. The elevator's arrival chime, faint, familiar. A commonplace signal in the nocturnal symphony of any old structure. I reasoned drowsily, a late return, an early departure for some unseen neighbor. By morning, the memory had evaporated like dew. But the chime returned, days later, slicing through the low murmur of my television, just past the witching hour. This time, undeniably close, a metallic summons just beyond my door. I muted the screen. Silence pulsed, amplifying the sound's proximity. At the door, ear pressed to cool wood, I heard the distinct sigh of the elevator doors parting. A frisson traced my spine, quickly rationalized. A neighbor, surely. Yet no footsteps followed, no voices echoed, only the low thrum of the lift's mechanics. Then the decisive thump of closure. Through the peephole's distorting eye, an empty corridor bathed in stark institutional light. Uncanny, perhaps someone adrift on the wrong floor, retreating in confusion. A clumsy explanation, easily shelved amidst life's accumulating clutter. It became a ritual, this midnight visitation. The chime, the opening sigh, the closing thud, occurring with unsettling regularity. One night, resolve hardening, I flung my door open, stepping barefoot onto the cool hallway tiles, hoping to intercept this phantom passenger. The overhead lights seemed to burn with unusual intensity. There it was. The elevator car, doors agape, vacant. My heart hammered against my ribs. A breathless pause hung in the air before the doors slid shut, expelling a faint puff of air that brushed my skin, and the car began its descent. A chill, sharp and sudden, prickled the nape of my neck. A mechanical hiccup, I insisted inwardly, a sensor misfiring. Yet the unease lingered, heavy and cloying. The following day found me seeking out Silas, the superintendent, a man whose perpetual expression hovered somewhere between weary resignation and mild suspicion, usually framed by the collar of a faded work shirt. I recounted the elevator's solitary ascents, its empty arrivals. He listened, brow furrowed, professing ignorance of any significant malfunctions. New panel, he muttered, sensors checked, no faults logged. Could it be random, scheduled? He shook his head. The system wasn't programmed for such autonomous journeys, especially not with nightly precision. He pledged to scrutinize the logs. Days later, the verdict. Nothing. No anomalies. No errors. My vigilance sharpened. I became a creature of thresholds, watching the hallway near midnight sometimes lurking just inside my doorway, cracked open to the corridor's sounds. other times retreating into the dim sanctuary of my loft, hoping to catch some fleeting irregularity. But the phenomenon developed a sly intelligence, or so it felt. It seemed to anticipate my readiness. Nights I lay in wait, phone poised to capture proof. The corridor remained silent, the elevator dormant. The moment I surrendered, retreated, put the device away, ding. Its arrival felt mocking. It was maddening. I recall one night, fueled by a surge of defiant curiosity. Midnight chimed. I bolted out, phone already recording. The doors stood open, revealing the mirrored interior, the overhead light flickering erratically now, casting shifting patterns on the steel handrails. Empty, utterly empty. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. I advanced, camera held high, my own wide-eyed reflection staring back from the polished surfaces. As I steadied my breath for a clearer shot, the doors began their inexorable slide. Instinctively, I thrust a foot forward to halt them. Simultaneously, my phone screen froze, the recording app seizing. Useless taps yielded nothing. The doors nudged my obstruction, then pulled firmly shut. I snatched my foot back as the car commenced its downward journey. My phone remained locked, a dead screen. A forced reboot wiped the slate clean. No evidence, nothing. That encounter left a residue of anger. I resist facile leaps into the supernatural. Pragmatism is my default, but this felt personal. A game played by unseen rules. I delved into the building's history, scouring digital archives for whispers of its past lives as office space. No lurid headlines surfaced. No tales of tragedy clung to its renovated walls. Just mundane articles about zoning changes and new tenancies. A relief, certainly, but it deepened the mystery of the elevator's nocturnal errand. Tentative conversations with other residents yielded little. Most offered shrugs, anecdotes of innocuous elevator quirks, but none shared my specific experience. The punctual, empty arrival on the top floor. A woman on the 5th mentioned occasional off-hour dings, dismissed as the building's normal pulse. It seemed this spectral summons was reserved for my landing, or perhaps I was simply the only one listening. One sleepless night, I sat shrouded in darkness, the city lights painting pale geometries on my walls. Midnight tolled, and with it, the inevitable chime. My pulse leaped. Rising silently, I eased the door open a mere sliver. There it sat, doors parted, bathing the threshold in its cool light. A low, almost electrical hum emanated from within, accompanied by a subtle flicker in the ceiling panel. The air felt colder, denser, or was that merely the chill of my own apprehension? I remained motionless, a statue carved from shadow, until the door's side closed and the indicator light tracked its descent. A tightness gripped my chest, the phantom pressure of a breath held too long. After that night, midnight acquired a specific dread. My gaze would find the clock around 11:50, anticipation knotting my stomach. Some nights, silence reigned. Others, the chime arrived, sometimes singular, sometimes repeating softly after a few minutes. Never chaotic, always that measured, deliberate sequence. Chime, open, pause, close. Sometimes I'd venture out to find only the closed steel doors. Other times I'd catch the open car. Each encounter left my palms slick with sweat, wiped hastily on my trousers. This involuntary fear felt shameful, yet inescapable. I attempted a logbook, noting the exact times. 12:02 a.m., 12:10 a.m., midnight sharp. always within that narrow window. Leaving the hallway light burning changed nothing. Earplugs offered no true barrier. Some internal clock remained attuned, my body tensing in expectation around that time. I approached Silas again, pressing for access to the mechanical room, a glimpse of the control system. Denied. Liability, he'd stated flatly. I reiterated my experiences, painting a clearer picture of the consistency, the emptiness. He seemed perplexed, perhaps even fractionally convinced something was amiss. But without log entries, without security footage capturing anything, the cameras covered the lobby and lower floors, not my landing. His hands were tied. The system, according to its digital brain, never made those unscheduled trips. My eyewitness accounts were ghosts in the machine. His final head shake, his murmured promise to keep an eye out, felt like a dismissal. Frustration simmered. Was I overlooking something simple? A rogue signal impervious to logs? An environmental trigger? One night I conducted an experiment, extinguishing every potential source of interference in my loft. Phone off, laptop dark, router unplugged, television inert. Silence descended. Midnight arrived. Ding. The elevator announced itself. A wave of cold anxiety washed over me. Stepping out, I faced the open doors, the steady hum. The light flickered once, then held. My gaze swept the interior. Bare floor, cold steel rail, mirrored walls reflecting only the empty space and the stark hallway. Nothing tangible, nothing amiss, yet the wrongness persisted, thick and undeniable. As the doors began to close, I retreated, letting them seal the space. The car descended. It had to be a glitch, I reasoned fiercely, but a deeper, quieter part of me felt the weight of something inexplicable, a feeling that intensified with each visitation, tightening muscles, quickening breath. Leo, visiting from out of state, became my unwitting corroborator. Over late-night snacks, I confessed the nightly peculiarity. He chuckled, dismissing it lightly. Let's see the ghost elevator tonight, then. Relief washed over me. Shared observation felt like an anchor. Precisely at midnight, the chime echoed. Leo's smirk vanished, replaced by wide-eyed curiosity. We crept to the door. I eased it open. The elevator waited, illuminated and empty. Bloody hell, Leo breathed. He took a step towards it, a motion I instinctively arrested, grabbing his arm. Don't. The word escaped before I knew why. He hesitated, peering into the vacant space. A moment stretched, thick with unspoken questions. Then the doors slid shut. The car descended. Leo turned, his face pale in the hallway light. Happens often, I nodded. The levity was gone, replaced by a shared, unnerving stillness. His presence confirmed it wasn't solely my perception. He tried filming it the subsequent night, phone ready. The elevator remained stubbornly absent. 2 days later, he departed, leaving me once more alone with the building's nocturnal secret. Less crazy, perhaps, but no calmer. Thoughts of relocation surfaced, tempting escapes from this unsettling routine. Yet the convenience, the lease, held me tethered. I adopted a strategy of deliberate ignorance. Approaching midnight, I'd seek refuge in sleep or loud music. Still, the clock exerted its pull. A glance showing 12:03 a.m. would send a jolt through me, my imagination painting the scene outside my door. Sometimes the chime pierced my defenses. Other times, I suspected phantom sounds, my own mind echoing the pattern. One night, A different impulse took hold, not fear, but a stark need for confrontation. I stood sentinel by my door. The chime sounded. I pulled the door wide and stepped resolutely into the hall. Open elevator, lit interior. Walking forward, breath shallow, I placed one foot over the threshold, into the car itself. The light was steady, the floor solid. A faint scent, metallic, oily, the ghost of old machinery. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stood within its confines for a heartbeat. Nothing happened. No presence manifested beyond my own taut nerves. I retreated swiftly. The doors closed. The elevator departed. The why remains elusive. Every midnight, near enough, it ascends, opens, waits, closes, leaves. Silas offers no explanation. The logs betray nothing. My neighbors sleep undisturbed. Video refuses to capture its performance when commanded, yet it persists, woven into the fabric of the building's nights, an anomaly no one can diagnose, or something else entirely beyond comprehension. For now, I endure. I no longer open the door. I listen for the chime, track its brief presence through the wood, and wait for the silence that follows its descent. It's unnerving, yes, but benign thus far. An insistent presence, an uninvited guest adhering to an invisible schedule. No official malfunction, no recorded error. Everything ostensibly is fine. But nightly, the elevator calls, offering its empty carriage, a silent greeting I cannot prevent. I hope someday it will simply cease. Until then, I coexist with the quiet haunt. Anxiety was an unwelcome, unbidden guest settling in my gut the moment my tires crunched onto the gravel drive. Logic, my usual compass, spun uselessly. I dealt in verifiable truths, not spectral shivers, yet confronted by the blank stare of the front door, something felt intrinsically wrong. The sky hung immaculate, a faultless blue canvas. The afternoon light poured thick and golden, and not a breath of wind stirred the leaves, yet gooseflesh prickled along my forearms. I swiped my damp palms against my jeans, a futile gesture against the chill emanating not from the air, but from the very presence of this place. Nerves, I reasoned, the predictable consequence of inheriting a property site, unseen from a relative whose existence had been revealed only by the solicitor's crisp, impersonal letter. Mine now, this silent house, an unsolicited legacy. A wilderness reclaimed the front lawn, tall grasses whispering secrets around crumbling borders choked with defiant weeds. I killed the engine near a listing fence post and stepped out into air thick with the scent of decay, the unmistakable breath of long-abandoned spaces, of damp earth and forgotten things. I pushed the thought away. Paint peeled from the clapboard siding like sunburnt skin. Sections of timber sagged, whispering of decades of neglect. The keys provided by the lawyer felt alien in my hand. I fumbled, trying one after another in the stubborn lock, until with a reluctant click, it yielded. I hesitated on the threshold, drawing a breath that tasted of dust before stepping inside. Beyond the threshold lay a gullet of shadow. Floorboards groaned like arthritic bones under my heavy boots, protesting the intrusion. Dust lay thick as velvet on every surface, muffling the world. Above, a high ceiling vaulted into gloom, drawing my eye down a long corridor that unspooled into the deeper recesses of the house. My flashlight beam sliced through the dimness, revealing corners swallowed by shadow. Each tentative step coaxed another groan from the weary wood. That first day became a slow procession through room after silent room, furniture shrouded like pale specters under yellowing sheets, shelves cluttered with the inscrutable detritus of a life unknown, and a grand staircase ascending into the upper darkness. The sheer number of rooms felt overwhelming, a labyrinth I couldn't map in a single pass. The remainder of the afternoon I dedicated to wrestling open stiff window sashes, letting stale air sigh out and fresher currents drift in. As I worked, furtive scrabblings echoed within the walls. Rodents, surely, or perhaps raccoons nesting in the attic's shadowed expanse. Mundane explanations for an old structure's complaints. Yet the tension coiled tighter in my chest, a persistent pressure beneath my ribs. Dismissing it required conscious effort. I selected a room near the front entrance as my temporary sanctuary, minimizing the need to navigate the shadowed arteries of the house after dark. Once cleared of the worst dust, it became my small bastion, its solid wooden door closing with satisfying finality. I found comfort in the thought of that sturdy barrier between me and the sprawling silence of the house. Night fell not gently, but like a dropped curtain. I positioned a small lamp on a bedside table, its weak glow a small defiance against the encroaching dark. The aged wiring hummed a faint warning, but the power held, provided I remained mindful of the circuits. I ate a meager dinner from my provisions, perched on a folding chair discovered in a corner, consciously trying to loosen the knot of apprehension inside me. The house settled into a profound quiet, punctuated only by the sporadic creaks and sighs of old timber settling. Without the distraction of a television, the silence pressed in, amplifying the whispers of the walls. Unease prickled at the edges of my awareness, but I forced my thoughts toward practicalities, errands, potential repairs, the timeline for deciding this property's fate. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, pulling me into a shallow, troubled water of sleep, where I tossed and turned, surfacing often into the listening darkness. Silence fractured near midnight. Slow footsteps sounded in the hallway just beyond my door, measured deliberate heavy treads on the aged wood. I went utterly still, breath caught in my throat, waiting. Silence returned, thick and absolute for several heartbeats. Then the pacing resumed, methodical back and forth. My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs. My mouth turned parched as desert sand. Imagination, I insisted silently, a trick of the tired mind. But the sound possessed an undeniable clarity, a solid weight. After what felt an eternity, it ceased. I remained awake, staring into the oppressive darkness above, immobilized by a primal dread. No sliver of light penetrated the gap beneath the door, offering no clue to the source. Sleep, after that, was impossible. Every creak, every settling sigh of the house conjured the image of a figure standing sentinel just outside my room. Dawn filtered in, painting dust motes gold, mocking the night's terrors. A thorough inspection revealed nothing amiss. The rooms lay draped in their shroud of dust, undisturbed. No footprints marred the floors, no sign of forced entry presented itself at the still locked doors and windows. Logic wrestled with a persistent, chilling intuition. I spent the day unpacking further supplies and venturing into the upper levels. A library, its shelves groaning under the weight of forgotten words bound in decaying leather. A study dominated by a vast, ink-stained desk scattered with brittle papers, a cramped attic, a repository of stagnant air, and stacked boxes containing indecipherable histories. No overt strangeness manifested, yet the air remained heavy, stale, and the feeling of being watched, of trespassing, never fully dissipated. That evening, I placed a lamp on a small table in the hallway near my room, hoping its glow would serve as a deterrent, a small, defiant sun in the corridor's gloom. After another solitary meal, I secured my bedroom door and switched off my bedside lamp, leaving the hallway illuminated. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the thin bar of yellow light beneath the door, ears straining against the quiet. The footsteps returned punctually, like a morbid appointment, around the same hour. My stomach clenched. They approached my door, paused directly outside as if listening, then retreated down the hall. Sweat beaded on my temples, my muscles locked. I waited, bracing for their return. They came back, the same slow, deliberate pacing, back and forth, a deliberate torment designed, it seemed, to unravel my nerves. My pulse hammered in my throat. I stared at the doorknob, convinced it would begin to turn, but it remained still. The pacing continued for perhaps 10 minutes before fading into silence. I listened intently for any other sound. Breathing, a cough, the rustle of clothing. Nothing. A desperate urge to fling open the door and confront the unseen presence warred with a paralyzing fear that kept me pinned to the mattress, my mind cycling through terrifying possibilities. I remained there, rigid, until the first gray light of morning. In the morning's tentative light, the hallway lamp still burned, but it sat askew on its table, tilted as if brushed against in passing. I knew with cold certainty I hadn't left it that way. My hand trembled slightly as I righted its small sentinel posture. Again I checked every window, every door, every conceivable point of access. All secure. The dust along the baseboards remained impassive, offering no clear impressions. The cold knot of certainty tightened in my gut. I forced down some breakfast, the food tasting like ash in my mouth, and resolved on a more systematic search. This time it felt less like exploration and more like an armed reconnaissance. I opened closets thick with the scent of mothballs and thyme, peered behind heavy furniture, scanned walls for any hint of hidden panels. My search led me to the second floor, down a long, shadowed corridor, ending in an obstinate silence, a thick-set wooden door secured with a heavy, rust-pitted padlock. My crowbar, wedged into the hasp, met unyielding resistance. The wood surrounding the lock was dense, ancient. No key among the set I possessed seemed likely to fit the formidable padlock. I noted its location, resolving to return with more persuasive tools, or perhaps seek a locksmith. For now, it remained an enigma. By late afternoon, weariness had settled deep in my bones. I sat on the front porch steps, nursing a bottle of water, the quiet hum of insects a stark contrast to the house's oppressive silence. Sitting there offered a brief truce. Leaving, finding a motel, hiring professionals. The thoughts were seductive. It felt like cowardice, yet staying felt increasingly like madness. But the house held me, a riddle demanding solution, a gravitational pull toward the locked room and the nightly pacing. The notion of a simple squatter felt thin, inadequate. The footsteps possessed a weight, a deliberation that didn't feel entirely human. That evening, I deployed a small digital camera on a tripod in the hallway, its lens aimed toward my bedroom door, an unblinking electronic eye capable of piercing the darkness with its infrared vision. I switched on the hallway lamp, started the recording, and retreated to my room. This time I left the door unlocked, a calculated risk, or perhaps sheer folly, born of a desperate need to feel capable of escape. I tried to read one of the volumes salvaged from the library, but the words blurred into meaningless shapes on the page. My nerves frayed thin. Eventually, I extinguished my bedside lamp and lay in the dark, the only illumination the persistent yellow line beneath the door. Hours dripped by in strained silence. My eyelids grew heavy, sleep threatening to pull me under despite my vigilance. Then the familiar cadence began, slow steps echoing slightly in the confined space, each fall punctuated by a faint pause. I stiffened, pulling the blanket higher, my breathing shallow. The urge to leap up, to confront, was a physical ache, but my body remained petrified. Suddenly, distinct above the creaking boards, came a soft click. My bedroom door eased open just an inch. The sound terrifyingly intimate. The footsteps continued their measured pace. My body went rigid, ice water flooding my veins. Through the narrow opening, I saw the hallway light, and then something dark slid across it, casting a fleeting eclipse, a shadow that stretched momentarily onto my floor. My pulse thundered in my ears. The shadow vanished. The door whispered shut again softly, sealing the terror within. Breathing felt like a conscious, difficult effort. I lay awake, listening, until the footsteps finally receded into the house's deep silence. Sleep was unthinkable. Around dawn, I retrieved the camera, its small red light still blinking. I stopped the recording and played it back on the small screen. The mundane, empty hallway filled the frame initially. I fast-forwarded, stopping around the time the dread rhythm had begun. The camera's microphone had captured the creaking tread clearly, then a flicker in the corner of the frame, a coalescence of shadow detaching itself from the deeper gloom on the left, pausing momentarily near my door, then gliding smoothly out of view to the right. I paused, rewound, watched in slow motion, a vaguely human form, indistinct, blurry, yet undeniably present. My hands were unsteady as I powered off the device, my stomach a cold void. Fueled now by grim purpose and a chilling certainty, I spent the day conducting another, more aggressive search. Flashlight in one hand, hammer and crowbar in the other, cold comfort against the unseen. The attic yielded only dust, cobwebs, and the weight of forgotten histories packed in trunks. Back at the locked door, I attacked the padlock with the hammer, the blows ringing loud in the stillness, but the metal held firm, the surrounding wood refusing to splinter. I considered the crowbar, but hesitated, wary of causing structural damage. A walk around the exterior revealed what I suspected: a single blinded eye on the second floor, a window boarded securely from within, its position aligning perfectly with the impenetrable room. I continued my sweep, checking every alcove, behind every drape, inside every wardrobe. The house yielded nothing but echoes and dust. As evening bled across the sky, frustration and exhaustion warred within me. I sat in the front living room, the solitary lamp casting long, dancing shadows, the weight of the house pressing down. I resolved on one final desperate measure for the night, a vigil, not hidden in my room, but out in the open, in the heart of the unease. I positioned a hard-backed chair near the main staircase, facing the corridor where the presence seemed most active. My flashlight and camera rested on the floor beside me, along with the small lamp providing a pool of nervous light. Hours crawled by. My back ached. My head began to nod despite my resolve. Then, sometime deep in the post-midnight quiet, a distinct creak from the upper landing jolted me fully awake. My eyes snapped open. I snatched the flashlight, its beam slicing through the empty air of the hallway before me. Nothing. Then another floorboard groaned, this time closer behind me. I spun around, heart hammering. The corridor leading towards the second floor, towards the locked room, stretched away into a maw of darkness. My throat tightened. I rose slowly, holding the flashlight out like a talisman. My palms were slick with sweat. Trembling, I began to walk, checking each doorway as I passed, each step echoing unnervingly. Down the long second-floor hall I crept, drawn inexorably toward the locked door looming at the far end. I pressed my ear against the cold, thick wood. Silence at first, except for the frantic rush of my own blood. Then a faint susurrus from within, a dry, slithering sound that made my stomach plummet. I recoiled, splashing the flashlight beam across the door. The padlock hung undisturbed. I gave it a tentative shake. It held fast, and then I froze. A shadow detached itself from the wall to my right, not my own. Taller, elongated, seeming to glide rather than step. Utterly silent, my legs turned to water. I whipped the flashlight beam towards it, but there was nothing there, only empty corridor. A wave of visceral fear washed over me, cold and sharp, tightening the muscles in my neck and shoulders. I tried to speak, to call out, but no sound emerged. I backed away, step by uncertain step, until I reached the head of the stairs. Then I turned and stumbled down them, the flashlight beam bobbing erratically, never leaving my grasp. I didn't stop until I reached my designated room on the first floor, slammed the door shut, and slid down against it, breathing in ragged gasps. I stayed there, listening, but only the house's usual nocturnal sighs answered. Eventually, I crawled onto the bed and stared at the ceiling, sleep utterly banished by the lingering chill of terror. Dawn brought fragile sanctuary. I needed distance, perspective. I drove into the nearest town, found refuge in the mundane clatter of a small coffee shop, and spent hours nursing lukewarm coffee, trying to assemble a rational plan. Call the police? Absurd. What evidence did I possess beyond my own frayed nerves and a blurry video? Hire a contractor to breach the locked door? Perhaps, or simply walk away, abandon this inherited burden and its creeping dread. Yet something held me fast, a stubborn refusal to be chased away, coupled with an undeniable curiosity about the locked room, the figure in the hall. It felt like the nexus of the house's secret. Before leaving town, I visited a hardware store and purchased a heavy-duty bolt cutter, its weight a tangible promise in my hands. I returned as dusk began to bleed across the sky. Stepping back inside, I was met with a profound stillness, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting. I deposited the tools in the living room. My hands shook slightly, but I took several deep, steadying breaths. The plan was simple. Wait for the safety of full daylight, then confront the locked door. but the prospect of enduring another night felt insurmountable. Even now, as I commit these words to paper in the borrowed circle of lamplight, the tools gleaming dully nearby, the house murmurs its secrets. Faint noises drift from upstairs, settling timbers or something else. Each thump, each scrape sends a jolt through my system. My gaze keeps flicking towards the shadowed archway, leading to the staircase, half expecting a silhouette to materialize. My throat is dry. A dull pounding has begun behind my temples. Resolve feels like a brittle thing, yet it holds. I will wait for the first light of dawn before I challenge that lock, before I confront the silence it guards. Until then, I sit here listening, fighting the primal urge to flee into the night. This house holds a truth shrouded in dread, and I find myself compelled, against all reason, to pull back the veil. The city simmered under a punishing afternoon sun the day Leo arrived at the old apartment block. Sweat traced rivulets down his temples as his luggage scraped protest across scarred parquet flooring. The moment he crossed the threshold, an ancient scent enveloped him. Not just dust, but the deeper, more permanent signature of mildew and weeping plaster. He'd swallowed the smell along with the low rent, the allure of downtown proximity, a potent antidote. A preliminary circuit revealed walls webbed with hairline fractures, paint peeling near the ceiling like sunburnt skin, and bedroom floorboards that dipped and swelled unevenly. Standard decrepitude for a building of its vintage, nothing more. He carved out space for his life amidst the emptiness, designated a corner for the glow of his computer screen, and resolved to acclimate to the mustiness. All he craved was a moment's stillness. Later, as twilight bled through the windows, a faint, dry scritch sounded from the living room. Leo froze mid-step in the hallway, listening intently. Silence rushed back in. He proceeded cautiously into the main room, where drawn curtains cast long, wavering shadows. On the far wall, a deeper silhouette seemed to flinch as he entered, though he quickly chalked it up to the fickle play of exterior light, a phantom born of moving day exhaustion. Sleep proved elusive that first night, the apartment's profound quiet pressing in on him, broken only by the maddeningly rhythmic tear of water from the bathroom faucet. He finally rose, padded into the tiled space, and wrenched the tap tight. Turning back towards the darkened hallway, his breath hitched. A presence, a density darker than the surrounding gloom, seemed to linger near the doorframe. A jolt sent him stumbling for the light switch. Stark illumination revealed only vacant air. Adrenaline surged, a frantic tattoo against his ribs. Sheer fatigue, he told himself. Just profound weariness. The ensuing week unfurled a subtle symphony of the unsettling. Faint rappings from within plaster voids. Floorboards uttering brief, complaining groans. Infinitesimal clicks near the baseboards. He conducted methodical searches for pests, peering into crevices behind appliances. No droppings, no nests, no gnawed materials. The landlord had mentioned the building's venerable age, a vague disclaimer that offered no explanation for these specific intrusions. He was on hands and knees one late afternoon, scrubbing grime from the kitchen linoleum when it happened. A breath, less than a sound, more an insinuation of voice, ghosting past his ear. It originated from directly behind him. He spun, heart leaping, empty space. goose flesh erupted along his arms, his pulse hammered against his eardrums. An errant draft, perhaps. The old building settling, he grasped at logical straws. Leo had always been constitutionally allergic to ghost stories, a firm believer in the explicable. Yet the persistent, undeniable wrongness of this place began to erode his foundations of rationality. He started catching things at the edges of his vision. A tenebrous shape melting through a doorway, a shadow gliding across a wall untouched by any light source, even when he knew he was utterly alone. Each instance brought a suffocating clench in his chest, followed by frantic scans of corners and alcoves, seeking a tangible intruder. The suspicion that someone else possessed a key gnawed at him until he replaced the lock cylinder, a futile gesture as the noises and the fleeting darknesses continued unabated. He tried to impose order, busying himself with unpacking, arranging furniture, hanging shelves. One afternoon, hammer poised mid-swing to drive a nail. An inexplicable zone of coldness brushed his left side. The windows were shut tight, the air conditioning dormant. He froze, muscles locking, breath held captive in his lungs. The pocket of icy air lingered for a palpable moment, then dissolved as if it had never been. He finished hammering mechanically, setting the tool down with hands that trembled slightly. Sweat beaded on his forehead, though the day itself held no particular heat. The nights remained the most fertile ground for unease. Around midnight, muffled thuds would sometimes emanate from deep within the walls, like knuckles rapping softly on the inside of the plaster. Turning on the television only seemed to sharpen his anxiety, the artificial light casting stark, dancing shadows. Flickers of movement teased the periphery of his sight. One night, roused by a distinct shuffle in the hallway, he rose from his bed. Heart pounding, he reached the door, took a breath, and swung it open. Emptiness. He flicked on the hall light, its glare harsh on the vacant passage. His arms felt heavy, his fingertips tingled with tension. "Anyone?" he whispered, the sound swallowed instantly by the quiet. No reply ever came. Curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for answers, eventually drew him to the small storage room tucked away at the hall's end. A single naked bulb cast a weak circle of light on walls that seemed even older, more deeply stained than the rest of the apartment. Inside lay a broken chair, several collapsing cardboard boxes shedding dust, and brittle, yellowed newspapers. He leafed through them, relics from decades past filled with forgotten headlines, none overtly sinister. There was no sign of squatters. The door possessed a lock that bolted only from the inside. Then, without warning, the filament in the bulb above flared brightly, sputtered and died, plunging him into absolute blackness. Panic surged as he fumbled for his phone, activating its flashlight. He swept the beam across the small space, and his blood ran cold. Huddled low in the far corner was a figure, a condensation of pure shadow, utterly featureless, a void in the shape of a man. He stumbled back, heart slamming against his ribs. When the beam swung back to the corner, it was empty. He fled the room without a backward glance. He spent the following days wrestling with reason. It had to be exhaustion, stress manifesting in sensory tricks. Surely the apartment's inherent gloom was merely seeding his imagination, but the feeling of being watched became a constant companion. Standing at the bathroom sink, He'd feel the prickle of unseen eyes on his back. Rinsing his mouth, he'd catch a flicker of distortion in the mirror's reflection just behind him. He'd spin around, nothing but the impassive wall, the slightly ajar bathroom door. His pulse would race, a temporary numbness sometimes seizing his limbs. He even tried sleeping with the lights on for a few nights, a strategy that proved counterproductive. The harsh illumination carved deeper, more mobile shadows into every corner, making the room feel crowded, and the silence wasn't absolute. Faint whispers seemed to curl from the hallway, not distinct words, but the sound of breath, of hushed susurrus just beyond the threshold of hearing. He'd press his ear to the door panel, sensing a proximity, a presence. After a few nights of this, he stopped opening the door when he heard it. He would simply stand there, breathing shallowly, until the faint sounds faded back into the quiet. One Saturday, he invited his friend Sam over, starved for an objective perspective. Sam surveyed the place, cracked a few jokes about its gothic ambiance, but heard none of the subtle tappings, saw none of the fleeting shadows. "You're just wiped out, man," he concluded with a shrug. Still, Leo noticed Sam casting uneasy glances towards the ceiling corners. Sam did mention an odd draft near the window, one that made the hair on his arms stand up, but quickly dismissed it as poor insulation in the old structure. Sam's departure left Leo feeling paradoxically validated, yet more profoundly alone. That night, the quiet siege resumed. Lying awake in bed later that week, he heard it, a distinct scratching sound from directly beneath the floorboards. It was the dry, deliberate rasp of fingernails being dragged across unseen timber. He bolted upright, bathing the room in light, scanning the floor, desperate to pinpoint the source. It lasted only seconds, then ceased utterly, leaving only the frantic thrum of his own blood roaring in his ears. He stamped his foot on the spot, a dull thud, no response. He crawled back under the covers, eyes wide in the artificial light, staring fixedly at the ceiling. His sense of normalcy felt increasingly tenuous. Was this apartment his refuge or his prison? Tiny anomalies became sources of profound unease. The way the temperature in the bedroom would sometimes plummet for several minutes without explanation. Finding the closet door inexplicably cracked open when he was certain he'd shut it tight. One morning, his keys weren't on their designated hook by the door, but lay instead on the kitchen counter. He racked his brain but couldn't recall moving them. By the third week, a permanent knot of tension resided between his shoulder blades. His appetite dwindled. He took to long walks at odd hours, finding solace in the city's noisy, brightly lit anonymity. He'd linger in late-night cafes, nursing cooling coffee, postponing the inevitable return. Around 2 one morning, while drifting on the couch, it came. A sharp, deliberate tap, tap, tap on the living room wall. Knuckles on plaster, clear as day. Leo shot to his feet, strode to the wall, and pressed his ear flat against the cool surface. His pulse hammered in his temples. He knocked back, mimicking the rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Silence. He started to turn away, and in that instant, a single soft knock sounded directly behind him, precisely where his ear had just been pressed against the wall. He whirled around, nearly losing his balance, breath catching in his throat. A chill traced its way down his spine. "Who's there?" he managed, his voice a ragged tremor. The question dissolved unanswered into the heavy air. After that night, he left a small lamp burning perpetually in the hallway and kept his bedroom door slightly ajar. These small concessions offered marginal comfort. The shadows seemed fewer, perhaps, but the sense of them, the feeling of unseen company, remained. Crossing the threshold outward each morning brought an almost giddy wave of relief. The anonymous bustle of the office, the presence of other people, became a sanctuary. He found excuses, fabricated deadlines, complex projects to stay late, shortening the time he had to spend within those four walls. One Thursday evening, resolve hardening into desperation, he called the landlord again, pressing him about the apartment's history, any prior complaints. The man's voice was tight with annoyance. He reiterated that it was an old building, prone to noises, categorically denying any reports of anything unusual. Reluctantly, he granted Leo permission to check the basement, providing a key. Flashlight in hand, Leo descended into the subterranean chill. Concrete walls wept patches of mildew. Dust motes danced in the beam. He peered at defunct pipes and stacks of forgotten boxes, finding nothing overtly suspicious. Yet, the entire time, the unshakable conviction that someone stood just behind him prickled the back of his neck. He found himself whirling around every few seconds, heart hammering, flashlight beams slicing through the empty, stagnant air. After 10 minutes of mounting dread, he retreated back upstairs. That same night, trying to find refuge in a book on the couch, the living room lamp began to flicker erratically. Faint, dragging footsteps echoed from the ceiling overhead. The unit the landlord claimed was vacant. Then the unmistakable creak of a door hinge sounded from the hallway. Leo rose silently, crept to his front door, and pressed his eye to the peephole. The corridor stretched empty and dim, and then he heard it, the faintest exhalation of a whisper, seemingly inches from the other side of the wood. A physical jolt shot through him, his knees threatening to buckle. His pulse became a frantic drumbeat. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. He stumbled back from the door, his mouth suddenly arid. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, frozen, waiting, until the silence finally, slowly, reclaimed the space. He's been here nearly a month now. The shadows still flicker at the edges of his sight. The whispers still surface at unpredictable moments. The thought of leaving wars constantly with the practical reality of the low rent, a prize in this expensive city. He tells himself it's all in his head, a product of stress and isolation, but the relentless tension coiled in his muscles feels undeniably real. His shoulders ache constantly. His stomach clenches at every unexpected creak or pop from the building's old bones. Sleep comes only in ragged fragments, punctuated by knocks, clicks, and the occasional, terrifyingly intimate murmur near his bed. He wishes desperately he could pinpoint a cause, some rational fault in the wiring or plumbing. He still finds himself prowling the rooms, flipping light switches, peering into closets, a hunter seeking quarry he hopes not to find. No face has ever resolved itself from the gloom. No solid form has ever been apprehended. But he has seen movement, fleeting, peripheral, undeniable, and sometimes, far worse, he has felt touches. The phantom pressure of cool fingers brushing his arm, the breath-like sensation on the back of his neck. In those moments, his vision momentarily blurs, his breath catches in his throat. Is his sanity fraying at the edges? Or is he truly brushing up against something that lies outside the tidy borders of explanation? His phone is never far from his hand now. Part of him wants desperately to record the noises, to capture proof, but a deeper, colder part dreads what he might hear on playback, the confirmation that would shatter his remaining skepticism. The idea knots his stomach. He is so tired of jumping at shadows, tired of second-guessing his own senses. And yet, beneath the fear, a morbid fascination flickers, the chilling possibility that the mundane world has cracked open just for him in this apartment. Tonight, he sits on the worn sofa again, writing this down, trying to impose narrative order on the chaos, perhaps to exorcise it from his mind. The lamp beside him burns steady, for now. The kitchen is a black maw. The bathroom door is firmly closed. He wears a hooded sweatshirt despite the mild temperature. The air near his arms feels unaccountably cold. Every nerve ending is taut, attuned to the apartment's nocturnal sighs and groans. His gaze darts compulsively towards the hallway's shadows. The refrigerator cycling on makes his heart leap. The air conditioner clicking into life causes him to tense reflexively. He hasn't heard a whisper yet tonight, but the expectation hangs heavy, a palpable weight in the quiet room. He doesn't know how much longer he'll stay. This place is wearing him down, eroding him layer by layer. His innate skepticism is still there, buried deep beneath the accumulating weight of his experiences. He clings to the hope of rational explanations. Old pipes, faulty wiring, his own overwrought psyche. But in the dead hours of the night, alone he feels the hair on his neck rise. He sees those fleeting shapes in the corners. He hears those infinitesimal clicks and whispers from within the walls. This is not a story he ever thought he'd tell, yet here he is living it, day by unsettling day, waiting for some kind of resolution that never seems to come. For now, he just copes. He locks his doors meticulously, keeps his keys close, his phone closer. Peace feels like a distant memory, but he hasn't entirely surrendered his grip on sanity either. If something is truly here with him, it hasn't harmed him physically. It only makes its presence known night after night, a persistent, lurking awareness just beyond the veil of sight. And Leo is left perpetually wondering when or how it might finally decide to show itself more clearly. The instant the truth coalesced that the machine haunting my rear view was a specter cast in my own car's metal and glass, I understood. This wasn't mere happenstance. It was a waking delirium, a fissure cracking open beneath the mundane, poised to swallow me whole. My fingers fused to the wheel's worn leather, knuckles gleaming white under the faint dashboard glow. This night, I sensed with chilling clarity, was rewriting my existence. It began as nothing more than the weary commute from my late hours cataloging ephemera at the city archives. 2:17 a.m. glowed accusingly from the dash as I eased the sedan from the starkly lit employee lot. The neon hum of the always open sign of a nearby deli bleeding away in the mirror. The streets were spectral veins, empty as they always were in the deep velvet hours of our quiet metropolis. 100 times I'd traced this route, a path etched into muscle memory. But tonight, the atmosphere was charged, thick with an unseen static that prickled the hairs on my neck. Perhaps 10 minutes spun out along asphalt ribbons winding through slumbering districts before the headlights registered. A constant, measured presence, neither encroaching nor receding. Nothing alarming, not initially. Just another soul navigating the pre-dawn quiet. Yet, as I navigated the familiar labyrinth homeward, diverting onto narrower, sleepier lanes shrouded in shadow, it clung. Unease, a cold seed began to sprout. I strained to decipher the driver through the glare behind, but saw only an indistinct shape, a void behind the wheel. A test, then, a deviation from the known path. At the slumbering crossroads where I always turned left toward my apartment block, I swung right. The headlights behind swung wide, mirroring the maneuver without hesitation. A cold knot tightened low in my gut. Calm, Elara, I breathed. The name a fragile anchor. Perhaps they're lost, following someone who looks decisive. A flimsy rationalization, already dissolving against the deliberate predatory weight I felt pressing in from behind. Another turn, arbitrary, nonsensical, then one more. Each deviation met with instantaneous, fluid mimicry. Sweat slicked my palms, my breath hitched in my tightening chest. It was then I saw it, a detail snagged in the periphery, magnified by the twin beams stabbing the dark. The car wasn't just similar to mine, it was its ghost image made solid. Same midnight blue finish, same make, same model. Even, dear God, the faint crescent scar low on the passenger side door, where a rogue shopping cart had left its indelible mark weeks ago. Impossible. The word was a dry rasp in my throat. My foot pressed down, urging the engine to a whine. The car behind matched the surge effortlessly. I bled speed, slowing. It decelerated in perfect, unnerving synchrony. It was like gazing into a looking glass, but this reflection possessed mass, momentum, and a terrifying reality. My thoughts scattered, frantic birds trapped in a cage. A hallucination born of fatigue? Had I drifted off, ensnared in some hyper-realistic nightmare? Or was this something other, something infinitely more sinister? My fingers fumbled for my phone, a desperate grasp for connection, for help. Only static answered, a dead hiss where salvation should have been. No signal, naturally. The ensuing minutes became a frantic blur, fueled by adrenaline and primal fear. I drove blind, careening down unfamiliar capillaries of the city's edge, where streetlights grew sparse and the darkness thickened, pressing close against the windows, all in a desperate, failing bid to shed my pursuer. Yet, no matter the feint, the sudden turn, the impossible maneuver, it remained, a steadfast shadow in the mirror. The only illumination stemmed from our paired headlights, twin lances piercing the oppressive black. Then a skeletal structure emerged from the gloom, a derelict service station, its sign bleached and paint peeling like sunburnt skin, windows boarded like sightless eyes. Years of abandonment radiated from it, yet in that moment it appeared as sanctuary. Without conscious thought, I wrenched the wheel hard right, tires screaming protest as I skidded onto the cracked, weed-choked concrete. I killed the engine, extinguished the lights, and sank low in my seat, holding my breath until my lungs burned. For a heartbeat, absolute silence reigned. Then the sound. Another engine dying, the crunch of tires rolling over loose gravel. It had followed me in. Motionless, scarcely daring to draw breath, I listened. car doors opened, then closed, a hollow percussion in the stillness. Footfalls, deliberate, crunching on the debris-strewn ground, drawing nearer. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat surely loud enough to betray me. I squeezed my eyes shut, offering a silent, incoherent plea to any indifferent cosmos. The footsteps halted directly outside my door. A shadow fell across the driver's side window, eclipsing the faint starlight. Slowly, dread coiling in my stomach, I lifted my head and found myself staring into my own face. A strangled gasp caught in my throat as I recoiled. The person, no, the thing, standing mere inches away, was me. My dark hair, my eyes, the small faded scar high on my left cheekbone from a childhood tumble. But the expression, it was horribly wrong. A rictus, a grotesque parody of a smile stretched across familiar features, radiating a chilling, predatory amusement. Time stalled. We regarded each other across the fragile barrier of glass. Then, slowly, inexorably, it lifted a hand, my hand, and tapped the window. A sharp report, like bone striking glass, echoing in the profound silence. Panic detonated within me. My hands, trembling violently, scrabbled for the keys, fumbling against the ignition. The entity outside made no move to intervene, merely watched with that fixed, terrible smile as the engine roared back to life. I slammed the gear shift, spraying gravel, tearing back onto the desolate road. I drove like someone possessed, pushing the car, pushing myself, fleeing into the swallowing night. My mind reeled, incapable of processing the impossible vision. It couldn't be real. It defied logic, yet each terrified glance into the rearview mirror confirmed the horror. My car, my duplicate, driven by my smiling doppelganger, kept pace relentlessly. I don't know how long I drove. Time unraveled, losing all meaning as I fled through a landscape smeared into streaks of black and gray. The fuel warning light flared on the dashboard, a baleful crimson eye casting ominous shadows. Just as despair began to solidify, convinced this chase through hell would never cease, a glimmer of hope pierced the gloom. The weathered "Welcome to Oakhaven" sign. The next town, civilization, light, witness. Praying the sputtering engine would hold, I pushed harder. As I shot past the sign, I risked one last look back. The road behind stretched empty and dark. A fractured sob of relief escaped me. I eased my foot off the accelerator, coasting into the sparse sanctuary of Oakhaven's limits. The few streetlights, the warm glow spilling from a 24-hour diner. They were the most beautiful sights I had ever witnessed. I pulled into the diner's parking lot, my hand shaking uncontrollably as I finally turned the key, silencing the engine's ragged breathing. For long moments, I just sat there, cocooned in silence, trying to coax my racing heart back into a normal rhythm, trying to grasp the enormity of what had transpired. Eventually, summoning reserves I didn't know I possessed, I pushed the car door open. The cool night air felt blessedly real against my flushed skin. On unsteady legs, I walked towards the diner's entrance, craving coffee, warmth, the simple presence of another human being. As my hand reached for the cool metal of the door handle, a flicker of movement in the plate glass reflection snagged my attention. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. There, under the sickly yellow sodium lights of the parking lot, stood my car, and leaning against its flank, bathed in that jaundiced glow, was my pursuer. It offered a slow, deliberate wave that twisted knowing smile still firmly in place. I stumbled backward, my spine hitting the diner door, jarring it slightly open. When I blinked and looked again, both the car and the figure were gone, vanished into the night air. I burst through the door, startling the lone, weary-eyed waitress, polishing the counter. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. My mouth opened, the terrifying narrative poised to spill out, but the words died on my tongue. How could I articulate the impossible? Who would ever believe such a thing? I'm fine," I managed, the lie brittle as glass as I slid onto a cracked vinyl stool. "Just a long drive. Could I get a coffee, please?" While she moved to fill my order, I stared at my reflection caught in the gleaming chrome surface of the napkin dispenser. It was me, Alara, just as it should be. But now a profound unease settled deep within me. Was that smile curving my lips just a fraction too wide? Did my own eyes hold a faint, alien glint I'd never seen before? I realized then, with a certainty that chilled me more profoundly than the night air, that my nightmare hadn't ended at the town line. Whatever had hunted me, whatever had worn my face like a mask, was still out there. And worse, far worse, was the insidious thought that perhaps a fragment of it, a sliver of that wrongness, was now inside me. As I wrapped my still trembling hands around the warm mug, I knew one thing absolutely. I could never go home again, because somewhere cruising the dark highways, wearing my face and driving my car, was something that sought to usurp my existence, and I harbored the terrible conviction that it would not rest until it succeeded. The final turn of the screwdriver seated the screw with a satisfying firmness into the aged metal. This antique lock, salvaged from the garage's dusty depths, felt substantial, a proper guardian for my front door. I swung the heavy panels shut, the scent of old wood and oil momentarily pleasing, a test of the handle, solid, another, still secure. From the inside, I inserted the long, skeleton-like key. It slid home with oiled precision, turned, and the bolt shot across with a resonant clack. Pulling on the door confirmed it, held fast. Good. Then the reversal. I turned the key the opposite way, anticipating the smooth retraction of the bolt. Silence. The mechanism offered no response. A harder pull on the door yielded nothing but unyielding timber. The key, turned again, met only stiff resistance. And beneath that resistance, filtering through the solid wood, a sound surfaced, a low, breathy chuckle from the other side. Faint, yet undeniably present. Every hair on my arms prickled erect. I froze, key still clutched tight, straining my ears. Nobody resided beyond that door. I lived utterly alone. A faint scratch followed, the delicate horror of fingernails trailing across the exterior wood. Heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I pressed my ear to the door, listening to the void where the laughter had been. One more attempt with the key, futile. The lock remained stubbornly, inexplicably engaged. This refuge was mine alone. The modern lock it replaced had been functional, sterile. This old one promised character, perhaps even superior strength. Now, ironically, it held me captive within the familiar confines of my own living room. I shoved my shoulder against the wood, rattling the handle again. immovable. I jiggled the key, withdrew it, reinserted it with painstaking care, tried again. Nothing. And with each futile turn, that muffled laughter echoed, not loud, but distinct, intimate, laced with amusement at my predicament. A knot tightened in my chest. My gaze swept the living room, the slumped shape of the sofa, the impassive screen of the television, the coffee table littered with magazines, a solitary lamp casting long shadows from the corner, the unassuming cabinet against the far wall, searching for some displacement, some sign that the world inside had warped along with the lock. All remained stubbornly normal. Leaning close, my voice a strained whisper against the grain of the wood, I ventured, "Hello." Silence answered, pregnant and listening. Then the dry, rasping reply, that sound like nails, or perhaps something sharper, being drawn with agonizing slowness across the door's outer face. The peephole, removed earlier to accommodate this archaic mechanism, offered no view, just solid wood between me and the unknown. "Who's there?" I managed, striving for a steadiness I didn't feel. No answer came, only after a beat, a faint vibration against my palm, still pressed to the door, like the gentlest, most insidious tapping. My throat felt like sandpaper. Retreating, I forced myself to think rationally. Windows, escape routes. I crossed to the one overlooking the street, its lock stiff but yielding. I pushed upwards on the sash, stuck fast, the old wood frame prone to swelling in damp weather, but never like this. I threw my weight against it. It didn't budge an inch. The second window flanking the television offered the same implacable resistance. A peculiar wrongness settled over me, cold and inexplicable. My hands trembled. The back door, then, through the kitchen. I twisted the knob, pulled, jammed. The deadbolt, usually smooth, refused to turn. Frozen, solid. Defeated, I drifted back to the front door, the heavy iron key cold in my hand. Slowly, deliberately, I inserted it once more. A faint creak answered my turning pressure as I pulled, and the laughter returned. Closer this time, a soft, conspiratorial chuckle breathed directly against the wood, relishing my struggle. I tried to shut it out, focusing instead on the lock itself. Heavy, forged iron installed precisely according to diagrams, found folded within its box. It couldn't simply fail from the inside. Kneeling, I scrutinized the keyhole, the bolt's housing, the strike plate. All appeared perfectly aligned. Another push against the door confirmed its utter inertia. Sweat slicked my palms. I wiped them absently on my trousers. Trapped. The word echoed in the sudden silence, heavy and suffocating. Kicking it seemed futile, the wood too thick, too solid, and who knew what waited on the other side, perhaps anticipating just such a desperate act. The urge to scream, to rail against the unseen presence surged, but I choked it back. Fear must not be shown. Instead, I pressed my ear to the wood again, listening intently. Faint whispers now, insidious threads of sound weaving through the silence. Indecipherable words, a low, continuous muttering. I swallowed, the sound loud in my own ears. Was that my name? Impossible to be certain. Leaning closer still, my forehead met the cool wood. The susurration intensified slightly, syllables brushing against comprehension without ever fully forming. Something about the room. Inside. Secrets. Hidden. Look. I recoiled, a chill tracing its path down my spine. The living room. My eyes scanned the space again, desperately seeking anomaly, the familiar shapes, the usual clutter. Then my gaze snagged on the old cabinet in the corner, a hand-me-down filled with oddments. Defunct tools, stacks of receipts, a small, unadorned wooden box inherited from my grandfather. He'd mumbled something about old letters. I'd never felt compelled to investigate. Now, with whispers of secrets seeping through the door, the box seemed suddenly significant, charged with unspoken meaning. Breathing shallowly, I forced a semblance of calm and crossed the room. The cabinet door groaned open on protesting hinges, releasing a puff of dust. Inside lay the detritus of neglect, a lone screwdriver, yellowing papers, a folded rag, and there, the wooden box. Roughly the size of a thick novel, its edges softened with age. Lifting it, I was surprised by its heft. I glanced towards the door, the key still protruding like a question mark, then back at the box. Feeling absurd, yet propelled by an unease that defied logic, I worked the simple latch. The lid swung open noiselessly. Inside, a few brittle photographs and a small sealed envelope. The photos depicted this very room, years ago, furniture arranged differently. One showed the cabinet itself, and beside it, nestled beneath the floorboards, the small safe I'd almost forgotten. Removed years past, its memory buried. The envelope, smelling faintly of dust and decay, yielded to my tearing fingers. A single sheet of paper folded once. Neat, spidery handwriting conveyed a short, chilling message. Do not forget what you left behind. The door will not open until you face it. My heart pounded against my ribs. I reread the words, a prickling sensation crawling across my scalp. How could the presence outside know? What had I left behind? The safe. I'd hauled it out long ago, banished it to the attic's dusty oblivion. Was that what it meant? Hesitantly, I put the note aside. Back at the door, I tried the key once more. A slow turn, listening. The laughter fluttered briefly, then ceased. A new voice, quiet, distinct, breathed through the wood. Find what you hid. Panic threatened to engulf me. The attic, accessed through a hatch in the hallway ceiling. A chair dragged from the dining room provided the necessary height. Pushing the hatch upwards released a small avalanche of dust that made me choke. Gritting my teeth, I hauled myself up into the oppressive dimness. My phone's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating forgotten shapes. Stacked boxes, skeletal remains of furniture, old suitcases like sleeping beasts. And there, in the furthest corner, squatting amidst the debris, the familiar outline of the old metal safe. Scrabbling over joists, careful not to disturb decades of accumulated dust, I reached it. The combination lock etched in memory, my first apartment number. The tumblers clicked, the handle turned, the small door swung open. Inside, a sheaf of papers, brittle documents, and items I barely recalled stowing away. A tarnished wristwatch with a shattered crystal, a ring of unfamiliar keys, and another sealed envelope. This one contained a single stark instruction. Show them what you hid. Put it in plain view. Show who? The entity outside? Confusion warred with rising fear. I extinguished the flashlight, plunging the attic into absolute darkness. From below, a soft, protracted creak, as if the unseen presence shifted its weight against the door downstairs. Flashlight blazing back to life, I scrambled towards the hatch, heart thudding. Descending felt like returning to a cage, my knees weak. Back in the living room's unsettling familiarity, I emptied the safe's contents onto the coffee table. Old rental agreements, my birth certificate, faded bank statements, the mundane archaeology of a life, the broken watch, its hands frozen, the anonymous keys. Show them. What did it mean? On a desperate whim, I tried the keys in the antique lock. None fit. Perhaps place them near the door. A foolish ritual, but what choice remained? I arranged the papers, the watch, the keys on the floorboards directly before the threshold. Waited. Silence. Tried the lock again. Still stuck. But the whispering returned. Louder now, coalescing into discernible words. Not those. The secrets in the room. Inside. My gaze swept the room again, frantic now. Under the sofa cushions, loose change, a lost pen. Beneath the sofa itself, lying flat, breathing dust bunnies, a forgotten box crammed with old photographs. Family gatherings, smiling faces of friends long drifted away, colleagues from jobs past. A wave of unease washed over me as I flipped through them. The voice outside murmured again, unintelligible but insistent. I placed the box of photos atop the coffee table, exposed. Back to the door, key in the lock. This time a subtle give, a slight movement within the mechanism. Hope surged, tightening my chest. I pulled the handle, still jammed, but a low whisper answered, closer, deeper than before. Show everything. Comprehension dawned, cold and stark. It demanded a complete unveiling. Everything hidden, everything tucked away. I flung open the cabinet doors, pulling out every last item, receipts, tools, the wooden box with its cryptic contents, lining them up on the table. From a small closet nearby, I unearthed boxes of old clothes, bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, forgotten notebooks filled with adolescent angst and abandoned dreams. I spread them across the sofa, the table, the floor, until the room was awash in the flotsam of my own past. Panting, sweat cooling on my neck, I surveyed the chaos. Everything exposed. I approached the door, pressed my ear against it one last time. The whispering had subsided to a low hum, almost satisfied. I tried the key. The latch moved further, a more decisive click. The door shifted perceptibly in its frame. I tugged the handle. It yielded slightly, but still resisted opening fully. The safe's contents. I snatched up the watch, the keys, the documents, placing them directly before the door with the other revealed items. A final, desperate offering. Returning to the lock, I turned the key. It moved smoothly now, the bolt retracting with a soft thunk. Still, the door wouldn't open completely, as if held by an invisible hand. Then the voice, quiet, final. Everything is out. You are free. My breath hitched. One more try. The door swung inwards an inch, revealing a sliver of the empty, silent hallway beyond. No lurking figure, no shadow. Pushing harder, the door opened halfway. I stumbled back, stunned. The hallway was utterly normal, bathed in the dim overhead light. I peered left, then right. Nothing. The laughter, the whispers, the scratching, all gone. Holding the door ajar, I looked back at the living room, a landscape of unearthed memories and exposed vulnerabilities. Relief warred with a profound sense of unease. Stepping cautiously into the hallway, the air felt blessedly ordinary. I turned, examined the antique lock, tested it from the inside, my foot wedged firmly in the gap. It worked perfectly now, the key turning, the latch clicking back and forth without protest. What had just happened? I didn't want to analyze it, not yet. Standing in the quiet hallway, I focused on breathing, letting the adrenaline ebb. Calling someone felt impossible, explaining this ordeal unthinkable. Back inside, the chaos of the living room seemed to accuse me. Everything I'd kept hidden, now starkly visible. Strange, unsettling, yet the oppressive tension had lifted. I picked up the anonymous keys from the floor and, on impulse, tried them in the back door. They fit. The lock turned smoothly. I opened it onto the familiar sight of my small, empty backyard, then secured it again. Returning to the front, the hallway remained deserted. I closed the front door, leaving it unlocked this time. Sank onto the sofa amidst the scattered relics of my past. My pulse gradually slowed. Silence reigned, deep and absolute. No whispers, no laughter, just the quiet weight of memory laid bare. It felt profoundly weird, but the oppressive sense of entrapment had vanished. I could leave whenever I chose. That ancient lock, however, would remain untouched, a silent monument to a threshold I'd crossed both physically and perhaps irrevocably within myself. Dawn painted the bedroom window gray, but the first thing I registered was the metallic gleam of the photo frame on my nightstand, lying flat on its face. An icy thread unspooled along my vertebrae. Only last night I'd straightened it, exchanging a silent greeting with the smiling faces captured within. My family, or the version of it I knew. This quiet disturbance wasn't the first. Lately, the house seemed to exhale small inconsistencies in my absence. My name is Lena, at 34, having climbed a respectable number of rungs in the marketing world. I'd traded the city's frantic pulse for the sprawling quiet of this suburban house. It was an expanse I craved, yet its sheer size, coupled with the relentless demands of my career, quickly overwhelmed. Managing it alone felt like trying to hold water in my hands. Thus, the decision to hire help. Enter Ms. Croft, a woman whose 60-odd years were etched into a face of stern capability, armed with references as polished as the silverware she promised to keep gleaming. Efficient, meticulous, available precisely when needed, she seemed less a housekeeper, more a domestic miracle. I believed my problem was solved. For a blissful few weeks, it was. Returning home became a sigh of relief. Floors immaculate, laundry folded into neat stacks, sometimes even the scent of a prepared meal welcoming me from the refrigerator. Ms. Croft was the anchor I needed, freeing me to navigate professional tides without drowning in domestic currents. But then the subtle wrongness began. Whispers of displacement, a novel I hadn't touched resting on the ottoman. My carefully ordered shoes subtly reshuffled in the closet's dimness. The ceramic bird mug, my favorite, migrated to an unfamiliar shelf. Initially, I blamed myself. Fatigue, the mental clutter of deadlines. Stress, surely, was fraying the edges of my memory. Yet the anomalies persisted, growing bolder, louder. One evening, the stark glow of my laptop screen greeted me from the kitchen island. I never worked in the kitchen. Its home was the hushed sanctuary of my study upstairs, lid always firmly closed. My pulse quickened, a frantic bird against my ribs. A glance at the browser history confirmed my dread. Searches orbiting my name, tendrils reaching towards my relatives, my company. The following day, I addressed Ms. Croft. Her response was peculiar, a placid apology, smooth and seemingly practiced. She'd merely needed the device, she explained, to research a stubborn stain removal technique online. Those other searches must have been accidental clicks, rogue pop-ups. It sounded reasonable, yet her gaze held a stillness, a depth that belied the simple explanation. Doubt solidified into vigilance. I began documenting my home's stillness, capturing rooms with my phone before leaving, comparing the images upon my return. The alterations were minute, almost gaslighting in their subtlety. A throw pillow angled differently, a desk drawer left imperceptibly ajar, the very folds of my sweaters rearranged. Undeniable shifts in a silent landscape. The breaking point arrived with the violation of my private papers. The manila folder nestled deep within my desk drawer, containing the architecture of my financial life, my insurance policies. It sat askew, disturbed by mere millimeters. Opening it, the faint disarray of the contents screamed intrusion. Sleep became impossible that night. The house, once a symbol of achievement, transformed into a vessel of anxieties. Every settling groan, every elongated shadow felt like a precursor to revelation. The certainty that I was observed, that unseen eyes tracked my movements, settled cold and heavy in my gut. Morning found me hollow-eyed, resolve hardening amidst the exhaustion. I needed to witness the unseen. Phoning in sick to work felt like a necessary deception. I positioned a small camera, a technological spy, amidst the spines of books on the living room shelf. Then the performance. Starting the car, driving away, circling the block before parking just out of sight, a vantage point secured. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my sternum as Ms. Croft's familiar car pulled up, as she let herself in with practiced ease. Time stretched, elastic and agonizing as I split my attention between the silent facade of the house and the flickering live feed on my phone. Initially, normalcy reigned. Ms. Croft moved with her usual brisk efficiency, dusting, vacuuming, tending to the laundry. But then around noon, a shift occurred. Her movements acquired a different cadence, a focused intensity. She began a methodical exploration, opening drawers, peering into cabinets, her actions no longer those of a cleaner, but a searcher. Horror constricted my chest as I watched her ascend the stairs, enter my bedroom and make a direct line for the closet. She emerged moments later, clutching a small, unassuming box I kept tucked away in the farthest corner. A repository of old family treasures, fragments of my past. My breath hitched as she lifted the lid, her fingers carefully probing the contents within. It was too much. Propelled by a surge of adrenaline and violation, I burst from the car, sprinting towards my own front door, keys fumbling in my suddenly clumsy grasp. "Ms. Croft," my voice, projected into the sudden stillness of the house, trembled despite my efforts to steady it. I forgot some crucial papers for a meeting, just popping back to grab them. A beat of silence hung in the air, thick and expectant, followed by the muffled sound of hurried footsteps overhead. Ms. Croft appeared at the landing, her usually inscrutable features flickering with surprise before instantly smoothing into professional calm. "Oh, Miss Thorne," she chirped, her tone excessively bright. "I wasn't expecting you. I was just finishing up in your room." A smile felt brittle on my lips, my thoughts racing. No trouble at all. I'll just retrieve what I need and be gone. Ascending the stairs, I felt her gaze like a physical weight on my back. My skin prickled, but I forced myself forward. Inside the bedroom, the heirloom box was back in its hiding place, yet not quite right. Angled differently, subtly proclaiming its recent disturbance. My hands shook as I made a show of rifling through papers on my desk. "Ms. Croft," I ventured, aiming for nonchalance. "You haven't happened to see a blue folder, have you? I could have sworn I left it right here." "No, I'm afraid I haven't," she replied, hovering near the doorway, a sentinel in sensible shoes. "Shall I help you look?" "That's quite all right," I deflected swiftly. "Likely left it at the office after all. I really should get back." I glanced pointedly at my watch, then hurried out, acutely aware of her unwavering stare, following me down the stairs and out the door. Driving away, my mind was a maelstrom. What could she possibly be seeking with such quiet intensity? That night, sleep remained elusive. Instead, I pored over the recorded footage, watching Ms. Croft's methodical sweep of my home, her focus undeniable. She hunted for something specific, but the object of her quest remained terrifyingly obscure. The next morning, I telephoned Ms. Croft, informing her coolly that her services wouldn't be required that day. Then I began my own investigation. I scoured the house, not for dust, but for deviations, for any clue that might illuminate her hidden purpose. Tucked within the pages of a seldom opened book in my study, I found it. A small slip of paper bearing a sequence of numbers. A phone number, unfamiliar. With trembling fingers, I dialed. A terse masculine voice answered, "Yeah?" "Who is this?" The question emerged as barely a whisper. A pause crackled across the line. "Who wants to know?" I ended the call, heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. What labyrinth had I inadvertently entered? The ensuing days transformed me into a reluctant detective within my own walls. More cryptic notes surfaced in unexpected places. I caught snippets of hushed phone conversations Ms. Croft conducted when she believed herself alone. Once, glancing out the window, I was almost certain I saw her photographing my mail before placing it on the hall table. I lived perpetually on edge, startled by every creak, compulsively checking locks. The police crossed my mind, but the evidence felt flimsy, spectral. A housekeeper who was too diligent, a pervasive intuition of wrongdoing. It sounded like paranoia, even to myself. The charade shattered one moonless night. I woke abruptly to the distinct groan of my study door, easing open downstairs. I lay perfectly still, ears straining, tracking the soft tread of footsteps moving below. Ms. Croft possessed a key, strictly for emergencies. This felt far from emergent. Slipping silently from bed, phone clutched tight, 911 pre-dialed, I crept down the darkened staircase. A thin blade of light sliced the gloom from beneath the study door. Taking a steadying breath, I pushed it open. There she stood, illuminated by the beam of a small flashlight, my desk strewn with papers she held in her other hand. Her head snapped up, eyes widening in the sudden glare from the hallway. "Ms. Croft," I stated, my voice surprisingly firm in the charged silence. "I believe it's time you explained what is truly happening here." For a fleeting moment, denial flickered in her expression. Then a visible deflation, her shoulders slumping as she sank heavily into my desk chair. "There seems little point in pretense now," she murmured, weariness lacing her tone. "I'm not precisely a housekeeper, Miss Thorne. My profession is private investigation." The floor seemed to dissolve beneath me. A private investigator? Investigating what? Who hired you? Ms. Croft, if that was indeed her name, let out a long sigh. "Your father engaged my services. He spent years searching for you." "My father?" The words felt alien, impossible. "My father passed away when I was a little girl." She shook her head slowly, her gaze holding mine. "That is the narrative your mother constructed. He is very much alive, Miss Thorne, and he has never stopped looking for you, not since the day your mother took you and vanished." The room swam. My carefully constructed reality fractured. Suppressed shards of memory surfaced. Hushed, angry parental arguments, clandestine phone calls late at night, the bewildering sudden relocation when I was 10, shrouded in secrecy. Why? The question tore from my throat. Why couldn't he find us before? "Your mother was exceptionally thorough," Ms. Croft explained, her voice softening slightly. "Covering your trail was her priority. It has taken considerable resources and time to finally locate you, your father. He merely wants an opportunity, a chance to explain, perhaps to mend." My legs gave way, and I slid to the floor, the rug rough beneath my palms. My entire history, the bedrock of my identity, revealed as a carefully crafted falsehood. As the first tentative rays of dawn began to filter through the study window, painting the room in nascent light, a decision formed amidst the wreckage of my understanding. I looked up at Ms. Croft, this woman who had systematically dismantled my privacy, yet paradoxically delivered a shattering truth. "I want to meet him," I said, the words barely audible. Ms. Croft nodded, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips. "He will be profoundly relieved to hear that. He never ceased loving you, you understand." As she retrieved her phone to make the connection, I remained seated on the floor of my study. Outside, a new day was breaking. Inside, so too was a new, uncertain chapter of my life. The truth, it turned out, had been residing within my own walls all along, masked by the unassuming guise of a housekeeper with a hidden agenda. What explanations awaited, what further revelations lay ahead, remained shrouded in mystery. But of one thing I was starkly, irrevocably certain: nothing would ever be the same. Beneath our stockinged feet, the ancient floor timbers groaned a low complaint, each careful tread through the umbral corridor echoing the frantic pulse in our chests. This was meant to be our haven, Julian's and mine, a sanctuary woven from silence and seclusion, far from the city's relentless clamor, a place to mend the fraying edges of us. But the heavy, deliberate tread ascending the staircase below shattered that illusion, twisting the quaint country inn into a snare, and a sickening certainty bloomed. We were the quarry. My name is Clara. What follows is the fracturing of a dream, the descent into a terror that etched itself permanently onto our lives. It began, as such things often do, with idyllic promise. Julian and I adrift in the separate currents of demanding careers and the monotonous erosion of city existence, had found ourselves distant shores. An advertisement tucked away like a forgotten bookmark spoke of the Gilded Sparrow Inn, a jewel nestled deep within undulating hills, promising restoration. It felt like fate, the perfect crucible to reforge our connection. The Gilded Sparrow, when we finally navigated the Serpentine Drive, seemed conjured from a half-remembered storybook. A grand Victorian edifice draped in ivy stood sentinel amidst sprawling gardens and the melancholic grace of ancient weeping willows. Our host, Mrs. Holloway, a woman whose age resided more in her gentle eyes than on her face, welcomed us with the scent of baking spice and smiles that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "A rare treat for you both," she'd murmured, a peculiar gleam in her gaze. "We're quite deserted this time of year. The Sparrow is entirely yours." As she guided us toward our chambers, a frisson of anticipation coursed through me. Solitude, stillness, and Julian, precisely the balm we craved. Our first day unfolded in blissful sequence. Explorations of the whispering grounds, a simple luncheon beside a chattering stream, the evening spent entwined before the hearth's hypnotic dance of flame. For the first time in what felt like an age, the knot of tension in my shoulders began to loosen its grip. Julian, too, seemed lighter, his laughter less guarded, his smiles reaching his eyes. It was the second night when the harmony faltered, replaced by a dissonant chord. We lingered after a quiet supper in the inn's deserted dining room, when the crunch of tires on gravel announced an arrival. Drawn by curiosity, we peered through the mullioned window. A sleek, obsidian SUV, incongruous against our own modest vehicle, disgorged three figures, men in dark, severe suits, stark against the twilight. "Business travelers, perhaps," Julian offered, though the note of conviction was absent from his tone. We retreated upstairs, attempting to dismiss the prickling unease. Yet, settled in our room, the silence pressed in, thick and unnatural. The familiar nocturnal sighs and groans of the old house were conspicuously absent, swallowed by an unnerving stillness. Shortly after midnight, the quiet fractured. Muffled voices, furtive footsteps ghosting along the corridor outside our door. Julian's body tensed beside me. He sat bolt upright, a finger pressed sharply to his lips. We held our breath, straining to hear as the sounds drew nearer. "You certain this is the room?" a low, gravelly voice questioned. "Confirmed," came the curt reply. Mrs. Holloway verified before we attended to her. Ice traced a path down my spine. Attended to her? What horrors did that euphemism cloak? Julian was already moving, silent and swift, pulling on clothes, gesturing urgently for me to follow. Scarcely had we dressed when the brass doorknob began its slow, deliberate rotation. In a surge of desperate ingenuity, Julian slammed the room's heavy armchair beneath the knob. A flimsy defense, but perhaps enough to purchase moments. "Hey!" The voice outside, sharp with surprise as the door met resistance. "They know! Get it open!" Wood shuddered violently as a heavy impact struck the door. Julian seized my hand, pulling me toward the tall window, overlooking a narrow balcony that skirted the building's flank. As we scrambled onto the cold, dew-slicked wood, the sound of splintering timber erupted behind us. Heavy footfalls pounded into the room we'd just vacated. "Balcony! They're on the balcony!" a voice roared. We fled, bare feet slapping against the aged planks. Shouts pursued us, punctuated by the sharp shattering of glass. At the balcony's termination, Julian hoisted me onto the angled roof of a glassed-in sunroom below. He clawed his way up beside me, and we navigated the treacherous, moon-slicked shingles with agonizing care. "There!" A disembodied cry from the darkness below. A powerful beam sliced the night, pinning us in its glare. The air split with the sharp report of a firearm. Something whined past my ear with vicious speed, and a piece of roofing tile near my foot exploded into fragments. "God, Julian!" I sobbed, terror constricting my throat. "They have guns!" His face, illuminated by the cold moonlight, was a mask of grim determination. "The car? It's the only way." We reached the roof's edge. Below, our sedan waited, a beacon of escape so near, yet separated from us by the armed figures now converging on the lawn. 3, Julian breathed, his grip crushing mine. 1, 2, 3. We leaped, landing with jarring force in the soft, yielding earth of Mrs. Holloway's meticulously tended flower bed. Agony lanced through my ankle, but raw adrenaline propelled me forward. We bolted towards the car, weaving frantically as more shots cracked through the night air. My fingers, trembling uncontrollably, fumbled with the keys, scraping against the ignition. The engine roared to life just as one of the men reached the driver's side, his fist smashing against the window, sending spiderweb fissures across the glass. Julian slammed the gearshift into reverse, tires spitting gravel as we fishtailed away from the inn. In the rearview mirror, stark silhouettes sprinted toward their own dark vehicle. "Who are they?" I choked out, my heart a wild drum against my ribs. "Why us?" Julian shook his head, knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. "No idea. Police. We have to reach the police, now." We careened through the twisting country lanes, the twin beams of the SUV, a relentless presence in our mirror. Each time they gained, Julian would wrench the wheel, find a sudden turn, accelerate, somehow maintaining a fragile lead. Cresting a steep hill, the distant, welcoming glow of a small town shimmered into view. A fragile tendril of hope unfurled within me. Safety was close. Then, abruptly, catastrophically, our engine coughed, sputtered, and died. "No, please, no," Julian muttered, pumping the useless accelerator. "Not now." The car coasted to a halt, steam pluming from beneath the hood like a final defeated sigh. Behind us, the SUV's headlights swelled, consuming the darkness. "Run!" Julian yelled, already tumbling out, pulling me after him. We plunged into an adjacent field, the tall, dry grass lashing at our legs. Behind us, car doors slammed, voices barked commands. The sweep of a flashlight beam scythed across the field. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but the sounds of pursuit were an unrelenting goad. We stumbled upon the field's edge, where it surrendered to the dense embrace of a forest. "This way," Julian gasped, dragging me into the tangled undergrowth. Branches clawed at our faces, tore at our clothes. We could hear them crashing through the woods behind us, the sounds terrifyingly close. Just as exhaustion threatened to claim me entirely, a faint glimmer pierced the trees ahead. We burst from the tree line, finding ourselves miraculously on the outskirts of the town we'd glimpsed. "There!" I pointed, breath tearing from my lungs. A squat brick building down the street, a police station, its windows still casting squares of light onto the deserted pavement. Summoning our last reserves, we sprinted towards it. From the forest edge behind us, frustrated shouts echoed on the night air. We crashed through the station doors, startling the lone officer at the duty desk. "Help us!" I gasped, collapsing against the worn counter. "Please, they're trying to kill us." The ensuing hours were a disorienting haze of frantic explanations, formal statements, and lukewarm, bitter coffee. As the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the sky, the chilling truth emerged. The men were operatives of a dangerous criminal syndicate. The Gilded Sparrow Inn, our idyllic retreat, had served as their operational facade, and Mrs. Holloway, their reluctant, perhaps terrified collaborator. When she had attempted to convey a warning, they had ensured her silence permanently. We, the unexpected guests, were loose ends, inconvenient witnesses marked for erasure. The days that followed were steeped in the sterile procedures of investigation. The police apprehended the men who had hunted us through the night, but the syndicate's leadership remained elusive shadows. Julian and I relocated soon after, the sense of violation, the phantom feeling of being watched, too deeply ingrained to ignore. Our bond, forged anew in the crucible of terror, was undeniably stronger, yet we both bore the indelible scars, some visible, others buried deep within. Now, years removed, sleep sometimes offers no refuge. I jolt awake, heart hammering, the phantom echo of footsteps pacing a darkened hallway, haunting the quiet of our bedroom. Julian holds me then, a silent, steadfast anchor, reminding me we endured, we are safe. Yet a sliver of doubt remains, a persistent question whispering in the deepest parts of me. Will we ever truly reclaim that lost sense of security? For we learned a harsh truth in the heart of those rolling hills. The most perilous dangers often wear the mask of innocence, and a dream can curdle into an inescapable nightmare in the space of a single terrified heartbeat.